So is this thing live? I think we are currently broadcasting. So welcome to the presentation here that we have for you today. We're going to be doing an introduction on web dev. I'm Patrick. With me is Jagroup. We're from the Developer Student Club at UC Davis, and we hope to talk with you guys a little bit share some knowledge about web development. I'm a freshman CS student. Jagroup, you want to introduce yourself? Give me a second. My audio is a little bugged.
Oh, sorry about that. My mic was
You're
muted.
muted. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I'm a second year CS student at UC Davis. I'm also part of the Developer Student Club. And we'll be going over this web dev workshop with you guys today.
So a brief introduction. Web development is a very complicated topic. There's a lot that you need to learn before you're like good to go. But we're just here to give you like a brief outline of some of these topics. We're going to give you a brief outline. We recommend you guys to look for yourselves deeper into any of these topics if you find them interesting. If you want to go into web development, these are all useful and very important topics. We can only scratch the surface of most of them, but there's certainly a lot more to it than just this presentation. But we just want to, show a little bit, see what's up. Yeah, so what we're going to be going over is HTML, which is like the content or how we structure the content of a page for a website. The CSS, which is how we style that content from HTML. Then we're also going to be going over JavaScript and React, which are how we kind of add interactivity with the user on the web page. And then APIs and Firebase, which are both ways of getting data and presenting them onto a website. So first up, HTML. What is it? HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language, it's kind of the standard for how web developers are or how programmers are gonna structure the page, or at least the contents of a page. When you look at a page, there's gonna be some type of content, like images, words, and we need a way to be able to structure that. And HTML is the way that we do that. Why is it important? It's just HTML is like the standard for doing this. It's used everywhere. Most web pages, basically all of them, use it in order to hold this data. On this slide, we have an example of like very basic HTML. We'll get more into this on future slides, but as you can see, we just have this text, hello world, organized into different tags. Yeah, tags and elements. So with HTML, we organize the data on a page using tags. Tags are different things that we contain. We contain the content of HTML in tags, and the tag, and when we, let me think about how to word this. We contain the content of a page in tags, and whenever we have a tag and some content, we call that an element. So there are many different tags, and they all have different properties, and they all have their own different purposes. Using HTML, it's kind of about using tags in order to organize a page in the most reasonable way and how you want it to your own preferences. Oh, by the way, if there are any questions, feel free to send them and we'll answer them right away. Right here on this page, we just have a brief outline of several different tags and their uses.
Next slide.
Yeah, sure. Here on this side, we just kind of see. For tags in HTML, is it similar to scopes in C++? Yeah, you could. Yeah, that's true. You can kind of think about tags as, that is a good way to put it. You can display the let me think about how to word this, but yeah, you can just kind of think about tags in HTML as scopes in C++. Um, so tags continued. I'm just here on the side. We're talking about how we're showing how different tags have different properties. For example, H1, which means header one, displays bigger text. H2 displays a smaller text, and then P, which stands for paragraph, like is how content is usually displayed. If
So
we look at
H1 is usually used to display headings. So you have like bigger main heading, and then this could be the subheading. Yeah.
okay, next slide. Now, all pages in HTML, we're able to, if we want to change how something looks, we can by using these things called attributes. So some tags take attributes. For example, the A tag is a hyperlink, and we're able to modify that hyperlink by providing it with a link that we want to go to. So for example, on this page, I have an A tag and I've modified it with an href attribute, and I have given it the SacHacks website. So if we were to have this page open and we took that hyperlink, we'd go to the SacHacks website. We also have an image tag here, and src, which means source, is what image I want to display for that. So we have the source attribute here displaying the SacHacks image. We also have a width and height attribute modifying the size that we are displaying that image as. Next slide. Again, this is all just like a brief overview of these topics. There's a lot more to them, but we just wanted to kind of run through these really quick. So for CSS or cascading style sheets are how we display these types of the HTML. If you think of HTML as sort of like a skeleton, CSS is kind of like the skin. It's how it looks to it's how we choose to display content to a viewer when we're making websites. Why is it important? Well, if you think about a website, if there was no style to that website, it would be probably pretty hard to navigate. CSS and HTML, we want to be able to give information to the user and make a website clearly understandable. If you go to a website that is very hard to understand, it can be very annoying to work with it. So we want to be able to present a good looking website that is easily understandable and makes sense and is intuitive to the viewer. So if we go to the next slide. Take for instance Amazon. Amazon, everyone knows what Amazon is. Buy and sell stuff. If we look at here, Amazon is using styles to help organize their website. It looks very clean, very slick. But if we go to the next slide, if you imagine Amazon without any style to it, it just looks like this mess of jarbled hyperlinks, and it's really hard to understand what you're looking at when you see this. So we have to use CSS to make things understandable and make it look good. If you go to the next page. When we talk about CSS, you can really use CSS to change like anything that you want about a page. I just have a quick example here of Hello World. In one, we have plain text on the left, and then I've modified it on the right to make it blue. I've italicized it. I've changed how it's aligned. There's so much more that you can do, so many options. Again, really a lot to talk about, but it's like there's so much to talk about, so much that you can do that it's a little hard to just cover them in just one presentation. So we're just gonna go to the next slide. CSS and HTML. So to actually connect CSS and HTML, this might not be too intuitive because we haven't really given too much code examples, but connecting CSS and HTML there's like several methods to do it. We have inline CSS, which we make use of HTML attributes in order to change the text. These all, by the way, are to get the same image as the last slide. And then internal means that we have a style tag at the start of our document in order to like let the rest of our document know what we want to present. And then finally, we have the external method, which is the most popular method, and it's widely used because it helps you keep your code organized. With external, you will have two different documents. You'll have a CSS document and you'll have an HTML document. The CSS document will contain how you want everything to look. And then we have the HTML document, which we will just import the CSS document into it. In the CSS document, we can change any number of things. We don't actually have a slide for it, but you can basically use classes in CSS. We can give different attributes or different tags, attributes, which are similar to classes in order to group them together and modify them as a whole. We can go to the next slide. So just to last aside on CSS, when we're displaying content for CSS, it's good to think about the content that we display on a web page in boxes. We have different, if we look at the image on the right, we have different attributes we can change like the spacing on these images or on these like different parts of a website. So like imagine that you're trying to imagine that you're creating a website where you want to display a list of products. If we think about each product as a box, we're able to space each of these things and organize it how we want to if we just use the correct, or if we just change the attributes how we want them to and treat them like each thing is a box. I know we're going kind of fast through all these things. So again, if there's any questions, make sure to just ask them. Sorry that we're not getting too in-depth into these things, but we're trying to work really quick here. And then group can take it away with the rest of this presentation.
So now we'll be going over JavaScript and React. JavaScript is mainly used to make your web pages more dynamic. So as y'all already know, JavaScript is a programming language that's used by programmers to add interactivity to web pages. Like for example, suppose you have a button on your web page, and every time someone presses a button, you want to increment one to the counter. That you're trying to display a counter, and every time someone presses the button, you want to add one to the counter. To do that, you would have to add JavaScript to your code. And we'll go over that at the end once we show you guys a demo. But for now, I'm just going to give you guys about an overview of the main concepts. Then we'll do the demo at the end. Yeah. So what is React? React is a JavaScript library that is mainly used by I think most people use React to build front-end pages of websites today. And what's so good about React is that it lets you build components. And component is basically, for example, you're trying to display products on a website, and each product takes a different title, different price, and that. What you can do is you can create one product component and then use that one component to display however many products you want. And this might seem complicated now, but once we go over the demo at the end, it'll all make sense. This is an example of what a component looks like. So suppose you have 10 employees that you want to display on your website. What you can do is you can create a card component, and props is the parameters it takes. What you can do is you can basically pass in the arguments for each employee into the card component, and it'll return a div tag with the image and the title embedded into it. And what this does is it makes your code reusable, and it's your code is a lot shorter this way, and it's easier to understand than suppose if you were to write each of these div tags for each employee one by one. That would just make your code repetitive. And once we go through a demo at the end, it'll all make sense. Yeah. So now I'll just go over how you can install React.js on your machine and how you can use it to create a template. Let me just open up that link. It takes you to this page. It's a Medium blog post, and here what you have to first do is you have to download Node.js, and then once you have the Node.js package downloaded, you can it so once you download the Node.js package, it also comes with npm. npm basically a package manager that manages all the modules for Node.js. And once you have Node.js downloaded, you can just do you would have to download the create React app module. And once you have that downloaded, you can do npm create React app. And what that does is it creates a React project template for you. So you wouldn't have to write every single file from scratch. And once you do that, you'll end up with all these files in your directory. So you would have node modules folder, a public folder, a source folder, and a JSON folder. So node modules folder usually contains all the modules your React app needs. And this is what the template React app would show. And let's go to the public folder. So the public folder usually contains all the static files. So suppose all the images, like you want to display this icon, that would go under the public file. And it contains index.html file. And then if I open that file up, you would see that we basically have nothing in the file. All we have is a head, which shows the title and then some links. And then in the body, all we have is this div tag with root. And you might be wondering, how are we displaying all this complex stuff with just that? So with React, all of your React code goes into the source folder. So all the components you may make would go into the source folder. And what you basically do is you inject all that source code inside this div tag, which displays this page for you. So let me go over the files in the source folder. So you would mainly have the index file and the app.js file. The index.js file, but what it mainly does is, so all of this is automatically generated when you do npm create React app. You wouldn't have to do any of this. You can just use this as a starting point and then build on top of it. So the index.js file, all it does is it gets the element that has the ID root, which is this index.html, this div, and it puts whatever's in this app component inside that tag. And this app component, it's imported from the app file that is in app.js. And if I go to app.js, you have this component called app. And the render is what we'd return when someone calls this app component. So if you were to add JavaScript code, you could add that here. And then that wouldn't be returned. The only thing you return when someone calls app is this div tag that is inside the return statement. And all we are returning is a header with the image and the paragraph that says to get started, edit that, which is basically this. And we have a demo at the end. where we will go over these components in depth. This was just to give an overview of what you would see once you initialize the template React app. I think I'm probably going too fast. Are there any questions in the chat, Patrick?
No, but I mean, if anyone has questions, make sure to speak up. I know it's really fast. React is takes a lot of time to learn, and this is not like enough to understand React. It took me several days. It took the group several days. Can we share the links again at the end of the workshop? Yeah, sure. I believe we can just.
Again, we'll go over components in depth at the end. We have a demo that we'll
Yeah, we
go
can
over.
make sure to share some of the links.
Um, so now we've gone over how to install React and what the template React app looks like once you initialize it. And another thing I wanted to show you guys was that in the React, suppose you're trying to build a navigation bar or a card, you don't have to build that from scratch. And what you can do instead is bootstrap them from this Bootstrap library. And if I click this link, so this library, this Bootstrap website, it basically contains several templates to most of the components that are people use most often. Like suppose you want to display a button on your website, you could click on button, choose whichever button you want, and then copy the code for this for the button. Or you're trying to display an employee card, you can click on cards, and then this is the basic template. You can just copy and paste that code and then build on top of this code. They have several different styles at the end. Like you can change their colors and stuff. And if you want to build a drop-down menu, you can bootstrap their drop-down menu from here. You can just copy paste this code, add it, and then you'll have this drop-down menu in your app. And then you can build on top of this instead of writing everything down from scratch. We also used this to build the navigation bar on our demo, which we'll go through at the end. And then they have more components too. Like suppose you want to show a table, you can bootstrap their table. You can copy this code, and then this is the template table that this will display. Yeah, I recommend you guys check out this website and go through all these components they have to offer.
Before I move on, I have a question here. What was the favorite project that you've made?
I helped build a retail website for my cousin. For that, I basically used React. And to build the navigation bar and the products and stuff, I bootstrapped most of the components. And then we built on top of them instead of writing everything from scratch. And the cool thing about this is it makes it a lot faster and easier to develop stuff, front end stuff. Any other questions in the chat? Guess I can move on to the next part. So as you guys have seen, that React, it's mainly used to display something on the web page. And how do we get all the data that we're trying to display? So for that, there are two main things you can do. You can either use a public API to get the data, or you could implement your own database using Firebase. So first, what is a REST API? So REST API, it's basically an application programming interface that it's just a bunch of rules on how you can have multiple programs talk to each other. So for example, suppose you're on YouTube and you're trying to search Batman in the search bar. What you would do is you would write Batman in the search bar and then press enter. Your phone would make a GET request to the YouTube API. And the GET request basically says, I want all the searches that contain this keyword Batman. And then the API would fetch all those videos and then return back to your phone. And your phone would basically display the JSON it receives in a more readable manner. And the REST APIs, they mainly support four methods. First one is get, which is used to get data from the API. For example, here when it searches for Batman, so we would say get and then pass in Batman as an argument. There's also this post method. So post is mainly used to add stuff to the database. Like for example, you're trying to post a picture on your Instagram page. What you would do is you would make a post request. Your like the back end of your in the back your phone's Instagram app would make a post request to the Instagram API, and it would basically say add this image to the database. And then there's the put method. Put is usually used to modify existing object in the database. So suppose you made a post on Instagram about a month ago, and now you're trying to change you're trying to change the caption you had on your post. You would make a put request with the modification you want to make to the existing post, and it would do that. And then the delete is mainly used to delete objects in the database. So suppose you want to delete your image from the Instagram's database on your Instagram profile, you would do delete. You would make a delete request, which would delete that image. And online, there are hundreds of APIs available for free that you guys can use. But I found a Git repo that had thousands of APIs about different stuff. Like they had an API about animals. And then I found some about weather. So suppose you're trying to display weather on your website, you could use the weather API. Or if you want to show different recipes on your website, you could use a food recipe API. And I found this API on the list. It's basically a cat facts API. So suppose you're trying to display a cat fact on your website. What you could do is you could make a GET request to this endpoint, and it would return a JSON that contains like 10 different cat facts, different facts about cats that you can display on your website. And here's the weather API I was talking about. So if you want to display weather, you could use the weather API and to display the weather data on your front end. And what you may see is that most of these APIs, they are not free. Like some of them, they would give you only about like 1,000 requests per month for free and then ask you to pay. But for the hackathon, you wouldn't be making over 1,000 calls. So you can just sign up for the free version. But so suppose you were to actually launch a weather app where you would have hundreds of users, then you would have to actually sign up for the service. But for most of them, you can just sign up for their free account and then use that for the hackathon project. Are there any questions in the chat, Patrick?
Nah, but make sure if you're confused about anything, you can just speak up.
So this API, that's for if you want to get data from an existing APIs. Now, you might be thinking, what if I want to create my own database? Then that's where Firebase comes in. So Firebase is basically a backend server for both web and mobile applications. And you can use it to host the backend of your web page. So to get started with Firebase, you would have to go to the Firebase, firebase.google.com, and then create a project. And once you're done creating a project, you would get this config code that it would ask you to add to your front end page, which is it's basically this config, with API keys, domain, database URL, the ID, the bucket name. So what you can do is once you get this config data, you can add it to your app.js or index.js file. And then, um, I think there's a tutorial online on how to import the files, import the modules you need, and then how to initialize it. But once you have the Firebase initialized, you can use these two methods to get and add data. So to get data, you would do firebase.firestore collection. Collection is the table you're trying to access, and then .get. And then to add, you would do this. And then here's a little demo on how it's done. So suppose you have a front end where you add title and description. Once you click submit, it submits it to the Firebase store, and you have that inside Firebase. So all you're doing is, sorry about that. So all you're doing is getting data, and then calling this Firebase Firestore collection.add with these two inputs, and then it would add them to your Firebase store. And
before we move on, we have a quick question. Are there more APIs like this weather API with specific functions / displays? If so, where is a good resource to find these? Are they open source?
I'm not sure, but I found a Git repo online that has a list of thousands of API. But if you're trying to look for something specific, guess you can just Google it. Like suppose, what do you want me to search, Patrick?
I'm not good at answering questions on the spot.
Let's say you're trying to. Can you ask that person for an example on what he might want to search?
Sorry, there's a short delay. Is there anything that anyone wants to get like a specific example of?
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure there's an API available for basically anything you want.
Look up COVID API.
COVID data API.
By the way, just to add on, if people go on the SacHacks website under the guide, there's actually a list of available API resources if anyone wants like to look. I believe they have some APIs. They have Postman, which is like something that people use to interact with APIs.
Yeah, Postman is mainly used to test APIs once you're building, when you're on the when you're trying to build APIs. But like for COVID, like I searched COVID data API, and this first search that came up, that seems like a good free API that you can use. So once you like go to the API, what you'll see is you'll see the endpoint, and then for this is like the main endpoint, and then suppose you want to look for historic US values, you would add this tag to the end of this. So COVID tracking / you want the daily data, you would add that to the back, and then just add this to your code. You can just say get data from this API, and we'll go over in our demo, we'll go over how to fetch data from the API. So yeah, you can just do get this, and then it'll send you a JSON of data, and your job on the front end part is basically to parse this data and then display it in components so that it's easier for the user to go through the data and understand it. Present. So now that we've gone through APIs and Firebase, we'll go over this demo that we were talking about. So what our demo basically does is we have it connected to a recipe API. So you type something in the search bar, click search. It would make a GET request to the API, ask them, I want all the recipes that have this keyword that you type in. And then the API would send you a JSON of all the data. And you basically display all the data in the front end. And now let's go through the code on how we did this. Um, where's the, here it is. Yeah, so here we have the public folder and the source. All of our components are in the source folder. And I think I explained that earlier. The public only has index, and all you need is the div ID root. All of this is made by the template. You don't have to change anything. But if you go to the source folder, we have index.js, which basically calls the app component. And in our app component, all we are doing is returning a div tag with the navigation component. And the navigation component is how the search bar is made. And that's where the search bar is implemented. So let's go over how we implemented this this navigation bar. It's under navigation bar.js. So all you have to do is import the modules that you would need for the function. We used a Bootstrap. So for that, we had to import some of those components. And this is basically the function navigation bar, which here's the fetch function to fetch data from the API. And then the code in the return, this div tag, this is all we copied this from the Bootstrap website. All we had to change was implement code on how we are going to store the input data. So if I type something in here, let's just say sandwich or a pasta, this is going to get stored in the data variable. And then once you click on the search bar, we're going to call the fetch data function. And fetch data, all it does is it says try fetching data from this API. This is the link to the API, and we're passing in the data as an argument. And then the result we received from the API, we convert it to JSON, and then we console log it, and then save it in the results variable. So if I click search, it's going to call the API. And this is the object that is returned by the API. As you can see, it's a JSON object of 10 different objects. And each object, it contains information about each recipe. Like suppose for recipe 0, we have ID, the title pasta with tuna, which is the first recipe. And then we have an image to the recipes picture that we're displaying here. And you might be thinking, so we're getting all these different objects. How are we going to display them? So what you can do is you can create one product component and then iteratively call that for each object to display it, which is basically what we're doing at the end of the code. So this is the code for the navigation bar. And to display all of these recipes, all you have to do is I enclosed it in the row tag, which displays them in row format instead of horizontally. And then all you're doing is result.map. So map is a built-in JavaScript function that, given an array, here we have an array of 10 objects, it would call the inside code for each individual object. So first it would call it for object 0, and then object 1, 2. And for each object, what we're doing is we're calling the card component that I'll go over in a second. We're passing in the title, the image link, and the ID, which is basically this ID title. the image link, and each object has that. So this for the second recipe, which is basically that's object one. So once we call the card component, it calls this JSON file. It calls this card function. And then this card code, we copied it from the Bootstrap again. And what we're basically doing is taking the argument, which is passed in as here through props. So when you do title equals that, image equals that, all of that would be passed in through props. And then you can do props.title to retrieve this value. So here we're basically returning a div element with the image link equals props.image. And then h4 is a tag to display title. We're basically doing props.title. And we're basically doing this for all 10 objects. And to do that, all you have to do is result.map and then call this function. And that's what I was talking about in the beginning, about making your code reusable and easier to understand. So instead of writing this for every recipe, instead of like copy pasting this for every recipe, what we basically did was we created a component, and then it makes our code reusable and easier to understand. Let me close this. Yeah, so here's the list of all the recipes that were returned from the API. And another thing I forgot to tell, but in React, instead of creating simple JavaScript variables like var, using the let keyword, let result equals that, instead what we use is we use state. This is a special React component, and what it basically does is once you call that, it returns two functions. The first one, which binds to result, is usually used to read the data that is saved here in the array. And then the set result is used to change the data inside this array. And what makes this different from using regular variables is that suppose in your code you were to change the array, like here we fetched data, and then we use set result to change the results data. So if you're using useState, what it does is every time you change the result variable, it would reload this entire component, which would automatically show up on your website. Instead, if you were to use a result and you made any changes, it wouldn't reload the website. So once we clicked search and then added all the search data into this variable, it wouldn't reload the website. You would have to manually it wouldn't reload the website. So you have to use these special components from React, use state for these variables. Again, in this workshop, we're just giving an overview of React, because React, it's hard to get used to at first. It actually took me about 2 days to get used to it when I first started using it. And if you guys want an in-depth tutorial on how to actually use React, I recommend watching tutorials on YouTube, because there's a lot of good tutorials that you can watch. There are some about 2 hours long that go in depth about all the stuff you need to know to master React. Yeah, there's one about 1 month old. Yeah, I just recommend picking one tutorial and watching that if you're trying to learn React. I think it'd be a lot helpful. Yeah. And I think that's basically it for our presentation. Yeah, we just wanted to give you guys an overview of what's possible with React, like what type of applications you can build and how you can give an overview of how you can basically do that.
Yeah, sorry it's so brief, but if anyone has any questions, you can make sure to ask them. We're here for a good bit longer. Also
And
the links. Is there?
if you guys need help, feel free to reach out to the mentors that are in the Discord channel. They can help you guys with specific questions if you're stuck on something on your project.
How can we join the Davis Developer Student Club and learn more about it? Um, actually, not the best answer to this. Uh, off my head. If you want to get more, if you want to interact more with the club, you can definitely go check out our Facebook at DSC UC Davis. For actually joining the club, I'm gonna be honest, I don't quite know. Uh, I joined back a while ago. I don't know if we're still taking members as of now. But
You can tag Akshay on in the SacHack
yeah, in
in
SacHacks.
the SacHack Discord because he's the president of Developer Student Club at Davis, so he should know more about it.
If we wanted to, Chris, if you wanted to send links, how should I go about that?
Which link do they want?
I'll just send like all of them.
Yeah, you can just go to YouTube and search React.js tutorial, and there are a lot of different tutorials there. And if they want, we can post our links to the Sandbox, which has all of our code and the page on the side.
Oh, yeah, if anything in this workshop felt a little rushed, you can go back and watch this workshop because it's actually being recorded. So on your own time, if you want to review some of the stuff we mentioned in here, if you felt like it went a little fast, you can go back and rewatch it.
Yeah, because it's hard to fit all of this stuff in a 45-minute workshop because we covered a lot of stuff, right? And if I don't know if you guys know about this, but there's a cool website called Code Sandbox, which makes it a lot easier to collaborate with people. So suppose you and your friend are trying to work on the front end, you can use Code Sandbox here. If your friend makes any changes, you'll see live changes in this code. And then whenever you save stuff, it automatically shows up on the right side, which makes it a lot easier to develop front end stuff. Like suppose I were to add this tag and then save it. Um, Let me add this in the React. Yeah, so if I were to add that here, save it, if it all you have to do is click save and it'll show up on the browser. Yeah, it could be a little slow sometimes, but let's add this in the navigation bar instead. I think I just broke something. Yeah, so I was basically trying to say you can make changes here and then it'll show up on the right side, and it's a lot easier to collaborate with people. You can share the link to the sandbox and then you can invite collaborators to this sandbox and work on it together. So if I were to go to the navbar, if I were to add a paragraph tag, save it, it would show up on here. It's not working for some reason. Um, so are we good to end the workshop, Patrick?
Well, unless anyone else has any questions, which we might want to wait a little bit because there's sort of a delay. But yeah. So thanks everyone for coming around to our workshop a little bit last second here, but hopefully we covered some stuff and we provided some resources for people to understand and get into React. Highly would recommend if you're interested in any form of web development, React and JavaScript, very important.
Yeah, it might be a little hard to get started, but once you get used to the syntax and this components, it's a lot easier to develop front end pages. Like you can build something like this in about 20 minutes, 10-15 minutes.
Yeah, Code Sandbox is kind of like it's kind of like a Google Doc for like web development because you can work with others and it's
Yeah,
really
because
useful to have.
that's how me and Patrick worked on this food web page that we made. Like we would join a Discord call and then work on this live while we're like talking in the Discord, going over what we need to add and stuff.
Uh, so it looks like we don't really have any more questions, so I don't know how we're supposed to wrap this thing up here actually. Uh, Final thoughts on this whole thing? Web dev, it's gonna be a very big thing and it's already big, but I only see it getting bigger in upcoming years. It's very important. A lot of apps are being based on the web nowadays, so there's a lot of value in being a web developer, and I can only see it really growing in like the need for web developers.
Um, Working on APIs and backend servers is also like a big thing. Like, I myself enjoy working more on the backend stuff than the front end. Yeah, both the backend and front end both are like good fields. It's I guess up to you whichever you like more. Like if you enjoy working on building APIs more, then I would say go for that.
Socials, um, look up developer student club. Uh,
Yeah,
not much
I'm
else to add.
sorry I can't see the chat. Or
We're being fed these questions through a short delay. Sorry about that.
oh, that was actually in the chat. You guys can ask him questions if you guys have any questions about Developer Student Club.
Yeah, make sure to talk to Akshay if you're interested. Uh, Club's really fun. Work in small groups with other students to work on projects. Really gets you to actually do work instead of just sitting there.
Yeah, and you get to meet other students who are in the same major as you. Yeah, now because of COVID, it's especially hard to get to know people.
Even if you're not just looking for code, there's other positions that you can look for in the club. How do we wrap this up? I don't actually know what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, one last thing. If you guys actually want to like learn React, I would recommend watching this tutorial as well as building a React app, because you can watch as many tutorials as you want, but to really know stuff, you have to build something and to go through the debugging process. Right, so should I just end the live stream then?